Hello, my name's Jackie Carter. I'm the EDI Disability Academic Lead at the University of Manchester, and I've set up a series of in-conversation pieces called Let's Talk Disability. The reason for this is that I want people who have a disability and who work and study at the University of Manchester to have opportunity to share what their lived experience, their everyday experience is with somebody in a position of influence, a senior leader at the university. So each episode will feature 2 guests, and each of those guests will have a conversation about what it means to have a disability at the University of Manchester. And at the end of the conversation, each will commit to one action, we're calling them one things, where they will take away something from the conversation that they've had and do something with it. I hope you enjoy listening, and we'll make, of course, the transcripts available for everybody. Thank you. So, hello, welcome to both of you, who I'm going to ask to introduce yourself to the audience listening in a minute. I'm Jackie Carter, I'm the host of these conversations, and I'm the EDI Academic Lead for the University of Manchester. So today's conversation is all about having conversations across the university with people at various levels in different roles. And Hannah, I'm going to start by asking you please to introduce yourself, and then Julian, I'll go to you.
Yeah, of course. So first I'd like to say thank you to Jackie and to Julian for having this conversation with me today. Hi, my name is Hannah. I am on the Future Leaders Graduate Scheme. I'm in my second year placement of Business Change Coordinator within PS Portfolios in the Strategic Change Office, and my first year placement was in Student Marketing Recruitment within the Faculty of Humanities.
Brilliant. Thanks, Hannah.
No worries.
And Julian? Who are you?
Yeah, just to say, well, hi, Jackie. So thanks, Jackie, for asking me to come on here. I've been really looking forward to this all week. And Hannah, it's been great to meet you in advance of doing today's podcast. Yeah, so I'm Julian Skyrme. I'm the Director of Social Responsibility and Civic Engagement at the university. I've worked here for 23 years now. I came here in 2001, just before 9/11. I remember watching that in my office back in 2001, just after I started working here. I was for many years sort of heading up things like student recruitment and admissions and widening participation, but I've been doing the job I've done now for just over 10 years.
Brilliant. Thank you, Julian. That's when we first met, isn't it? When you were in the widening participation
That's
role.
right.
And I remember having that conversation with you a long time ago. Hannah, we really appreciate you coming along today. Okay, these conversations are really about you sharing as much as you want to share about your about your disability, self-described by yourself, and also for Julian to get the opportunity to listen from his perspective. And it's to think about the challenges that disabled staff and students at the University of Manchester face, but also to focus a light on the strengths that disabled people bring. So I know this is going to be a conversation between yourself and Julian, and I might interrupt at certain points when you chime with something that I'm interested in. But I'm going to hand over to you, if that's okay. I don't know who's going to start.
Well, yeah, so I'd start, if that's okay then, and thanks, Jackie, for that. So we wanted this to be a conversation for people because I think Hannah's story is an amazing story, actually. She's an amazing woman who I'm really proud to say is a colleague of mine, just learning about some of the things that she's done already in her career and what she might offer in the future. I think you'll be really fascinated by the conversation today. What we wanted to do is just go through some of the salient points really from Hannah's biography, and I think they draw out issues I think lots of staff and students across the university will relate to, and particularly because Hannah's been a student until quite recently as well. I think what she's going to say will be really interesting to our students as well as our staff, Jackie. So I wanted to start off, just Hannah, just if you could tell us a little bit about why you're on this podcast then in terms of disability. What does that mean to you in terms of your experiences of being disabled?
So, yeah, the first reason why I wanted to come on this podcast is I've listened to all of them and I love all the different stories that I've heard, and they really resonated with myself as someone who has who suffers with chronic lower back pain. And I've got 2 different back conditions. So first of all, I have hypermobility, and I also have a diastetomatalia, which is quite hard to pronounce, which is a spinal deformity. And both of those cause chronic lower back pain. And they affect women more than men, both conditions. And on top of that, I've also got chronic anaemia, which I've been undergoing quite a bit of treatment for, still really iron deficient. And I also have long-term mental health conditions, so I've suffered with anxiety and depression. And the reason why I wanted to come on today's podcast is to kind of discuss my experiences with chronic pain, how I've self-managed, and the kind of resilience it's taken me to keep on top of that, so that I can enjoy my life.
I think there's so much in there, Hannah. Would you be able to perhaps explain to people all of these things you didn't just discover overnight, wake up and what you've just said? There's quite a lot in there. So just to unpack that, could you sort of talk a little bit about the chronology and sequence of how you've discovered some of, particularly starting with the back pain, and then we'll come on to some other things perhaps after that.
Yeah, of course. So I've experienced back pain, lower back pain for 6 years now. So it started in 2019 when I was doing my undergraduate degree, and I remember being like really struggling to walk, and I was experiencing like sciatica as well. And I'd gone to the GP a fair few times to get it checked out because I knew something wasn't right, and I just kept getting prescribed painkillers, and it took until my 4th try going to the GP that they actually referred me for an MRI. I went for an MRI, which is where they discovered the spinal deformity and also a disc bulge, and then I was supposed to have a referral to Salford Neurology Department, but then it was COVID, so then that took 2 years, and then I didn't end up getting my referral. I'd gone back to the doctors again. I spoke to some physiotherapists and they gave me some exercises and some advice on what to do. And then last December, when I first started working at the university on my graduate scheme, I had a really bad flare-up, really painful. It hurt for me to even get out of bed and to walk up and down the stairs. So I went back to my GP and I got a referral to the musculoskeletal team, and they've uncovered that I've got hypermobility. So 5 years it took me to get a proper diagnosis, and now understanding that the hypermobility and the spinal deformity both impact the way my nerves interact with each other in my lower back, and that's why when I do have back pain, it doesn't just feel like a bit of soreness. I can feel it in my actual nerves. So it took me 6 years. It was quite a frustrating experience. A lot of ups and a lot of downs and a lot of injuries I experienced because I was told to keep on exercising. The exercise that I was doing wasn't right for my body and I kept injuring myself. I also became quite intolerant to painkillers, which to me was quite scary. I was taking quite a lot of painkillers all the time, trying different massage oils on my back, trying everything, and nothing really helped. So it was a very frustrating period of my life, especially being a student and you've got all your exams, all your assignments, your dissertations to write. Really frustrating, and that triggered my anxiety because when I would wake, like for example, I've woke up in the middle of the night and I can't feel my legs and I've got them tingling sensations running down it because of the sciatica feelings. My anxiety would really trigger because I'd be thinking the worst, as you would do. You overthink, and I'd be thinking, oh God, is this like the end of me walking? Or, just that triggered my anxiety quite a lot. And then having those two kind of feed into each other, that when my back is sore, I feel anxious. When my back is sore, I also can't really go out for a walk or go and exercise. That makes me feel depressed because I feel quite isolated, especially when now, if I work from home, for example, because when my back's sore, I don't want to be around people. I don't feel comfortable being around people when I'm in pain. That is quite self-isolating in itself. So the two kind of tie into each other, but I've experienced mental health issues since I was 16, and I didn't realise what it was until I was around 21, because it wasn't spoken about then. I'm so glad there's more conversations around it now, that especially for young people and the climate that we live in. But yeah, from the age of 16 to 21, I was really, really depressed, and I didn't understand what depression was until I went and saw my GP. And now it's quite clear to me the cycle of the chronic pain and the mental health issues that I have. And then on top of that, I got diagnosed with chronic anaemia around 2 years ago. So that doesn't help with the feelings of pain and fatigue, and also my overall mood in general. I'm quite low mood. My energy levels are quite low, and I've undergone different treatments for it. I've still got chronic anaemia, but yeah, it's been quite frustrating. But I feel like understanding how the three interact helped me kind of address when I'm not feeling too great.
There's so much in there. Thanks so much, Hannah, for sharing that. Gosh, you're a very resilient person. I can tell as well. But some of these periods you've described must have been really challenging for you. And I just wonder whether, for people who are listening, in terms of the type of support you're able to get when you're a student, you're at Liverpool and then you did a master's with us, I understand, didn't you? And what was that like when you were a student compared to being a professional at the University of Manchester, the type of support you've been able to access?
Yeah, of course. So when I actually formally got diagnosed, I was actually in my in the first semester of my master's. So my time at Liverpool, I never accessed support because I didn't need it then. So when I came to Manchester and I got the diagnosis, I reached out to DAS, and I had a full at-home assessment. It was during COVID as well, when I had to do my master's online. So I got a full assessment. They provided me with my own ergonomic chair, IT services. Actually, I had a really old MacBook. It was like a MacBook 2011 that I was still using when I was doing my master's, and somehow someone from IT was able to download software that meant I could talk onto Word and do my essays that way, so I'm not sat down all the time doing my work. I also received mitigating circumstances for all my coursework and exams, which really allowed me to take longer breaks and not feel too stressed to be sat there getting all of my work done, doing all my research for my exams. I could take that time to look after myself whilst getting all my coursework done. And then so I had a bit of a gap between finishing my master's and coming to the university as a member of staff. So I worked in the civil service for around 2 years. So then going from being a student at the university to then starting my graduate scheme here, within my first couple of weeks, I got a DAS assessment with my DAS supervisor, who was incredible. They ordered me my own ergonomic chair. We had things put in place. So my line manager was aware of my conditions and the kind of requirements that I need, such as working from home when I need to, standing up, having a stand-up desk available when I need to use it. And it's I've had a really positive experience from both being a student and being a member of staff, with the support that's been available for my chronic pain. I've never, for the other two conditions that I have, I've never sought help with from DAS. It's kind of stuff that I act on externally. And one thing I'd also like to say is the support from my line managers as well has been absolutely amazing. So my first year line manager ordered me my own adjustable desk to have in the office, so I didn't have to go and work on my own in a separate room. I could work in the same room as my colleagues. And then my new line manager for my second year placement, we're undergoing a refurbishment on the bottom floor in John Owen's, and they've ensured that I have a space in our temporary room with my chair always available for me to go and work in. So just little things like that for me have gone a really long way as well, as the support from DAS. So yeah, I've had so much support, and it's amazing and it makes me feel more valued as a member of staff as well. Yeah. And I also feel like because I've experienced such an inclusive environment, I feel like I can talk about my conditions, and I can be honest with my managers, and I can say I might need to work from home today. I'm not feeling too great. I need to listen to my body and focus on that first.
It's really encouraging, Hannah, to hear you talk about the different support that you've been able to get. And I think if we were doing this podcast 10 years ago, we might be having a very different type of conversation with somebody who had similar experiences to you. But we're all unique. And I think, Jackie, you're an expert in all of this. But what I hear is so many different factors going on. You've got what you might see as some more visible forms of disability. If you're struggling with your back, people might notice that. You also talked about mental health, and sometimes back pain you can't see, or you might try and hide it and put a brave face on that day. And I think those hidden forms of disabilities, I know you talk a lot about that, Jackie. So just listening to this, it strikes me, because why I'm on here is to learn, and I'm learning so much from you today, Hannah. And I think the thing I'm really thinking about is how do we get more of those conversations, Jackie, between members of staff and their line managers about this, because that relationship to me seems to be really important. As leaders,
Absolutely.
we need to self-model this, don't we? And to create the kind of inclusive culture, the safe spaces in which conversations, psychologically safe spaces that conversations can happen. But I mean, Jackie, you see a lot of this.
I was going to jump in. So I'm no expert. I mean, we can be expert on our own disabilities, but we can never be expert on other people's, because that's the whole point of having the lived experience. You know, what affects you with your condition will be different to what affects a different person with the same condition.
Yeah.
So we have to learn to listen, which is what Julian's saying. I was really struck, first of all, for the record, DAS. When we talk about DAS, it's a Disability Advisory Support Service, which we have at the University of Manchester, which supports both staff and students to get the adjustments they need for their disability or chronic illness, chronic pain in your case, Hannah, and to ensure that we're, you know, being disability inclusive and giving people what they need to perform to the best of their ability. And we have amazing disabled people at the University of Manchester who we're hearing about on some of these episodes. But one of the things that was curious about when you were talking, and Julian's touched on this as well, is about at what stage did you feel comfortable and confident in sharing with your line managers? Because we hear a lot that people that don't, for whatever reason, you know, it might be fear of being discriminated against, it might be just that they haven't exposed it to their colleagues, so they don't want to share it more openly. But at what stage did you feel able to share that you had needs that needed to be catered for in your role, both as a student, because you talked about mitigating circumstances, and as a member of staff?
So as a student, it was as soon as I got diagnosed, because I knew I needed support. I knew I wasn't going to be able to finish all of my work on the deadlines as well as keep up with everything. I knew that I needed to take regular breaks, and that I can't work at the same pace as other students. So as soon as I got my diagnosis and the evidence, I put in an application to have a meeting with DAS, and they were super proactive on it. And then when I got the job at the university, when I was applying for the Future Leaders Graduate Scheme, there was a kind of like guarantee that if you have got a disability, we will prioritise your application. So that
it's changed now, but
that's
what it used to be called. Yes, it's a disability confidence scheme.
That's it. Yeah. So when I saw that, I was like, wow. Even at the start of even applying for the job, I can already see it's an inclusive employer. So that made me feel really confident and comfortable with sharing my conditions with the people who lead the graduate scheme and also my line managers. So when I joined the scheme, I actually met my manager a few months in advance, and I disclosed it to him then, just so that he was prepared for when I came, and also just to be honest and transparent about it, because I didn't want to not tell him and then be asking to work from home and it be kind of lost. And maybe the lack of trust might have been there, whereas being able to disclose that and feel comfortable that I could, it built up a lot more trust, I think, and he was then able to support me throughout my first year. And the same goes with my new line manager. I felt really comfortable to tell them as soon as I met them. So it's a number of things, and as well, when I joined the university, I'm really interested in EDI, and when I looked at all the different networks and saw the variety of different networks that there are, it reaffirmed to me that it is an inclusive employer, and that made me feel more comfortable to discuss with my fellow future leader graduates, who are all in my cohort, my conditions, because my back pain has also meant that I've missed out on activities with them, and that also makes me feel isolated. But the fact that I even feel comfortable to say, guys, like, I'm not going to be able to make it to this session today, my back's playing up, can someone catch me up? Everyone has been so supportive, so I'm quite lucky and fortunate, but this is how it should be everywhere for everyone.
I would say we're lucky and fortunate to have you, though, because you know, we need more people modelling that. It's not just leaders, Julian, is it? It's people who are living with this day in, day out, and being able to feel comfortable and safe to be able to share with colleagues, because that's how we change a culture.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think don't underestimate the positive impact you're having on others, Hannah, just obviously coming on a podcast like this to speak about things so frankly, but also when you're having smaller conversations with people in your team. I think it does encourage everyone to come forward. And this is the interesting thing about disability compared to perhaps race or sex, for example, because disability isn't just a fixed category.
No.
I'm getting older. I'm 50 now. I'm probably going to have some disabilities as I get older. Maybe my hearing won't be quite as good, or your sight, obviously, on basic things like this can happen. But obviously for women, it's menopause, there's all sorts of different things that can be conditions rather than disabilities. And I think even the language we use sometimes isn't always helpful to say you either do or don't have something, because I think it varies at different times of your life. People go through different episodes with their mood as well. So I think all of this, these conversations, just making them more normalised. I know that's what we're trying to do today. The more we can all talk about this, I think line managers definitely have to, it's their responsibility, I think, to model this as far as possible. But you'll also have lots of line managers who don't have disabilities. And so you having those conversations, I think, has a positive effect upwards in the organisation as well. So don't underestimate the value of what you're doing. I think it's really profound, actually.
Thank you. And I think just on what you just said, then one thing that I found, again, just really inclusive, is that the university and my line managers and also the support from DAS, they recognise my conditions. It's not classified as a disability under the current legislation, but that doesn't prevent me from gaining access to support from my employer, which I think is a real shame that it's not, because the conditions that I have can lead to disability in the future if I don't self-manage and I don't look after them, after myself. And it was quite eye-opening to me that, you know, I can access all this support even though I'm not actually classified as disabled. I have impairments. I think
that is such an important point. I'm so glad you brought that up, and in the way that you have, because you're absolutely right. The Disability Advisory Support Service is there to support people's needs, to enable them to do their job or to complete their studies, okay? And whilst you might not fit into a box that is labelled as something that is then super labelled as disability, they are still there to support you. And it's the same with ADHD. People who self-identify as having ADHD can still get support from the DAS service. So, you know, we need to, the language sometimes isn't inclusive, which is what we're saying, okay, and that creates difficulty. And then when you start drilling down into the data and seeing what is and isn't measured and how people self-identify, and you've used the term disclose, we prefer the term share, but how people do or don't share their data, you know, it really affects actually the resource that we can put in to supporting people. And if we're undercounting, and we know we're undercounting at the University of Manchester in terms of people self-declaring that they have a disability, that has an impact in terms of the level of support we can give. So, you know, it's sort of circular. We need more people actually, Hannah, to be doing what you're doing and feel confident. And as you go through your scheme and become a future leader, you know, you become the role model for others to be able to do that as well. So as Julian said, don't underestimate the power and influence that you have by sharing your story here and elsewhere.
I agree. Thanks, Jackie. I think one of the things I was interested to pick up on, if I may, Hannah, is also you talked about the chronic pain and your condition. You also mentioned about the mental toil that's taken on you as well. And I think it's really brave to speak about this. You said actually something quite interesting. I was surprised when you said it. You said that when you were younger, when you were maybe 16, you're not... compared to me, you're not a very old person. So you're still you're somebody I'd class as a young professional in the university. You're on a graduate scheme, etc. So you're a relatively young person at the beginning of your career. But you still said that even in your lifetime, things have changed. You feel more confident now speaking about your mental health. And I was just comparing it to Jackie and myself, who've been working, for a longer period than you have. How much we've seen, Jackie, in our lifetimes. It's unbelievable, the difference. But I was really fascinated by you saying that even in the past 10 years, then that you've seen a difference. Tell us more about that.
So on my mental health, so
what's changed, in terms of perception and your willingness and ability to talk about that? Some of that might be an age thing. Some of it might be you maybe were hinting at society's changing as well. I think
so. I definitely think it was an age thing, because when I reflect back on it, I do quite a lot of reflection, and I like to kind of monitor my growth as a human being. So when I kind of reflect back on it, and I look back to when I was between the ages of 16 and 21-ish, those were the years where I was quite depressed. I don't remember a lot of those years, to be honest. I don't remember a lot of uni, because depression can actually make you black out periods of your life when you are depressed. So when I was, I had a bad moment at university, which made me go and seek professional help. So I and following on from that, I was then again taking medication, and just kind of relying on the medication to make me feel better, and it never did. And I just kind of got myself into a rut of not knowing what to do and not knowing how to help myself. So I started to exercise. I started going out for walks. I started to go to the gym, and I can't believe that how much that has helped me. I also think as well, when I was doing my masters, I absolutely loved it. I was passionate about what I was studying. So I did my masters in international development. That really helped me kind of feel a bit more resilient, because I was passionate about what I was doing day to day and what I was researching and what I was writing my essays about. I don't remember during my masters having much issues with my mental health then. And then it's kind of on and off, because you don't know when you're going to have a good day or a bad day, basically. But from exercising and being proactive on when I've got low mood and when I feel anxious has really gone a long way for me. And when I compare myself to who I am now compared to when I was 16, I'm so proud of where I've come from. And so when I look back on when I was 16 compared to who I am now, it's been 10 years I've experienced anxiety and depression. And the older I'm getting, the more reflective and the more I want to be proactive and resilient on looking after myself for the long term, because, you know, the 3 conditions that I've mentioned, they're all a cycle into one another. Yes. So when my back's sore, I don't want to exercise, and that's when I feel isolated and depressed, or anxious. When I feel anxious, I don't want to move my body, so then I'll have back pain. So having those two experiences have made me become really resilient in, you know, some days I might not want to get up and go for a walk, but then I have to think about the bigger picture and my long-term health in it, because I don't want my back to get worse. I want to look after my mental health. I want to come to work and, you know, give my best, even though we're all going to have bad days. That's completely normal. The lessons I've learned really is to give yourself a break. Don't be too hard on yourself. Because I was really hard on myself when I wasn't feeling great between the ages of 16 to 21, and that got me nowhere, really. So for me, it's all about being kind to yourself. It really does allow you to take agency and ownership of how you're feeling, and then you can act on it, and you can listen to your body, listen to your mind, and discover what you need right there in that moment. Whether that's taking the afternoon off work to look after yourself, or to go for a walk and put a podcast on, or, you know, to go and do a Pilates class after work or during your lunch break. It could be anything that makes you feel good goes a long way for your mental health, is what I've learned. So for me, that is doing Pilates and putting a podcast on when I go for a walk. That's my time out from life, work, what's going on in my head. It's where I just zone out and just reground myself.
How did you get that understanding? And was there particular support? Was it some advice from somebody? Was it speaking to somebody else? I'm always interested, because it sounds like you've been through a process of enormous growth and self-awareness. Yeah. Was there something you can look back now and say, it was this conversation, or it was that practitioner, or is this friend, or it was this film or podcast I listened to, or book I read? What was it, do you think?
So I think the main person that kind of influenced me with this is my mum. She's a nurse in A&E, and she's also the mental health consultant on the ward, and she deals with people. She cares for people with mental health every single day at work. And for me, who suffers with anxiety and depression, she'll tell me to go out for a walk, go and exercise, go and do something, pick up a book, stop watching the telly. So listening to my mum, who's, you know, a professional, and she cares for people on a day-to-day basis, really, and I live with her as well, so she could tell me what to do. She was probably the main person that helped me kind of get into that and to realise that. For me, I also used to follow quite a lot of different self-care Instagram pages, which did help, because they give you some tips on like reflection, and kind of goal setting as well. I feel like goal setting is really important to add to this conversation as well. Your goals or your to-dos could be something as simple as, you know, get some sunlight today, especially in winter, as the days are getting shorter, and a lot of research. into what I do now, I've been quite proactive in like looking online, like what is best to do when you're feeling anxious, what is best to do when you're feeling depressed, what is best to do when I've got lower back pain, and as well on the kind of discovery to find out what works best for me. When I did have my musculoskeletal referral, I was advised to take up Pilates, and I've been doing Pilates for around 8 months now, and it's completely transformed the way I have my kind of mind and muscle and body connection. Like I don't just move. It's really grounded me and being more mindful about what I do. And I'm quite privileged to be able to do Pilates because it's not cheap. It's quite expensive. And being in the position that I am on the graduate scheme, I can afford that now, whereas I could never afford to do something like that at university. Not many people can. So I was really happy to actually see that Be Active have introduced the mobile artists.
Yes.
I saw it I was looking to book a Pilates class and I saw it. I was like, I'm made up that they've introduced something like that for all staff to be included in it.
Yeah. That's a shout out to the Disabled Staff Network. No. Can I just comment on something you said? So these conversations are as much about strengths as challenges, as I said at the beginning. And you're painting a picture for Julian and myself and the listeners of, just how self-directed you've been and all that self-awareness, and you've worked really, really hard to put in place strategies and habits. Some of what you're talking about are daily habits, aren't they? Getting out and getting sunshine. Yeah. What advice would you give other people maybe listening to this? You've talked about being isolated and being in a place of not really knowing what to do. If somebody's listening and they're dealing with their own challenges as a result of being disabled or having chronic ill health, what would you, one tip almost, what would you say has really helped that it might be worth them thinking about?
So one tip that I would give that I kind of use, I use pretty much every day, is when I'm feeling fatigued because I'm anemic, and when my back is sore because of my conditions, and I don't want to do much, and I don't really want to go out into the world and socialise, and I don't want to exercise, try and think about the bigger picture and where you want to be later in life, and think about each day as it comes and how this is going to lead to the bigger thing and the life you want to lead yourself. For me, I get quite motivated by the fact that I don't want my chronic lower back pain to prevent me from doing anything that I want to do. Yeah. I want to live a fruitful life, and I want to go out and enjoy myself, and be a part of being a young person. It's one thing I should really mention is I find it quite difficult as being the only person in my kind of social circle, my friendship group, that suffers with chronic lower back pain, and it kind of feels a bit singled out sometimes. But the advice that I would give you is to kind of think about the bigger picture and the life you want to live, and focus on that, and just focus on what you need right then in that moment, and listen to your body and your mind. It's something I do every day, and it's really helped me.
Thank you, Hannah. That's such wise counsel, isn't it?
Yeah. Can I ask a related question, Jackie, to that?
Please
because
do.
I think that's really good advice for people generally, and thanks for sharing that. What about in a work context, Hannah? If there was people listening to this who either hadn't disclosed some physical condition or disability, or were feeling depressed or anxious and not sure about what to do, they hadn't done all the things that you've done, and they feel it's affecting them in work. I wonder if there's any advice you might give to people, because I'm sure there are lots of people like this around the university as we speak. Definitely.
So my advice would be to someone who's potentially not that comfortable discussing it with their line manager first, would reach out to one of the EDI networks. I'm a member of the Women at Manchester committee team, and the people who are on these EDI networks care about you. So my advice would be, if you don't feel too comfortable speaking to your line manager, reach out to either the Disability Network or any of the other networks that might apply to you. I know there's a neurodivergent network. Reach out to them for first initial support, see what they can direct you to different policies as well that the university has in place. And it's also just making friends who share similar experiences to you, which can help you then feel more confident to raise it with your line manager and contact DAS. So yeah, that's
Thank you. That's really
brilliant
good
question.
advice.
Thank you. And you're so right. Being accompanied and surrounded by people who get it. Okay, they might not understand fully what you're going through, but they certainly have lived experience of their own condition. Is very. You used a term previously about having agency. It gives you agency. If you can talk to people who really understand, it can be very empowering. And people then find the networks that will not only support them but open doors to other support mechanisms. That it's sometimes quite solitary to do that on your own, and you've clearly navigated the system and been very determined and persevered to get the support because you're very self-directed, but not everybody has the strength or capacity to do that. And if you're new to an organisation and you're part of a structured programme, so you've got allies and colleagues, peers who are around you, but not everybody feels like that at the university. It's a big place. It's a big employer. So you're absolutely right to say reach out to the EDI, different networks. And before we finish, I know you wanted to talk about intersectionality as well. So maybe that will be a nice way to sort of wrap up some of what we've been talking about before I ask each of you to ask your final question.
Yeah, so I was really interested, Hannah, in just learning more about you. You talked about being working class as well, and it's something that I think because it's in the legal sense, it's not a protected characteristic in the same way. I know there was a discussion at one point whether it should be, and it never was. Arguably, the type of society we live in couldn't function if that was in the way it does at the moment, if it was a protected characteristic, perhaps. So there's different debates about this, and I think we end up then perhaps following a more legalistic route in the university and following the protected characteristics, the legal ones. And we don't talk enough, in my view. I'm somebody who proudly talks about being working class myself. My dad was a lorry driver and a forklift truck driver. I'm the only person in my own family to go to university, let alone have a PhD and things. So I'm the unusual one. And I think it's an identity now. I'm middle class in my profession. My children certainly are. But it's something that stays with you forever, I think, in terms of your identity. And it really struck me talking to you and learning about your biography, Hannah, how important that is to you, and how when we have these conversations today, Jackie, about disability, we're talking of as men and as women, as people who have different socioeconomic groups. The three of us are white, for example. We don't come in neat packages. And what does that mean in terms of your experience in the university, being from a working class background, with everything else you've talked about as well? Do you think that's important?
100%. I think when you look at the university and where it is, it's in Manchester. And Manchester predominantly is a working class city. Where I'm from is working class. And I think it's not something that is ever spoken about, your social class, because it's not a protected characteristic, but it's something that interplays in everything. And it's something that the older I get, the more I recognise about myself. So, not only am I a young woman who experiences a variety of different conditions and impairments, but I'm also working class. So these different characteristics all intersect and create disadvantages and inequality within society. But then I also think it's important when we talk about intersectionality to realise your own privilege as well. So I'm privileged as a white woman compared to other women. And I think these kind of conversations about intersecting characteristics, I think they really need to be spoken a lot more about, because then we can understand how everyone is different. And it's not a one-size-fits-all EDI approach or social responsibility approach or, University of Manchester 2035 strategy. We're recognising each individual person at the university is different and has different experiences, and that we can't just cater for all people. And I think it's quite a, not only is it transformative and progressive, but I think there's a beauty in recognising everyone is different. And I'm really hoping we get to that place one day where we don't just have everyone siloed into, their gender, their race, their religion, their disability. It is more fluid than that, and we can recognise each other's different experiences.
Thank you. I think it's such a good argument for, we often say there's two sides to the sort of EDI agenda. There's that bit about it's the right thing to do, of course, and I think we're all sat here because we believe that recognising people's differences is just from a justice perspective. It's fair, it embodies equality, but there's also this argument around high-performing institutions are ones that are able to manage this diversity. The best organisations in the world bring talent in, they nurture it, they support it from all walks of life. Why would we not want somebody amazing like you, Hannah, working for our university, thriving here? That, as well as being the right thing to do, it makes us a better university to have somebody like you working for us. So I think your example there, understanding those differences, those intersectionalities, that's just part of, we need to make this more our core business, just that diversity being a strength. We know this from all other sectors of society really well. There's lots of evidence for this. I think in universities we sometimes are a bit lazy about that. We sometimes think of diversity as something like a problem to deal with and to solve rather than a strength and to celebrate.
Yeah, which is why we try to make these conversations not just about challenges but about strengths. And you mentioned the inequality word. Okay, that was one of the things that we took away from the conference. Julian and I were at the World Academic Summit last week, and Vice Chancellor and President Duncan Iverson was talking about inequality being, one of the most difficult challenges, actually, of the 21st century for universities and the role they play. So it's been an absolute... I feel very privileged, actually, to have listened to your story today, Hannah. So on behalf of myself and Julian, I want to say thank you. But we end these conversations with each of you asking the other to commit to an action. So I'm going to hand over. I've got a slide where, Hannah, you get to start with a question to Julian, and then we flip, and then I'll just wrap up.
Amazing. So, Julian, what one thing will you commit to as a result of this conversation we've had today?
We're so hard. Can I cheat and give 2? Is that okay?
Well, Nancy tried to give 3, so you can have 2, Julian.
No, just because it's got me thinking so much. So the first one is something I think I can do without you, Hannah. So there's a clue to my second one. The first thing I'd like to do, because as leaders, we really do set the tone. I recognise that. I know this from what people say. People who work in our teams will sometimes think of us first thing in the morning or last thing at night. There's a special place you have, and I think that gives a special responsibility. So it's a great question, Jackie, and I want to ensure I can foster a culture of inclusion. I can have conversations like this in my team. So I think I'd like to, the first thing to commit to is to have a conversation like this with my broader team, whether I'll get some advice off you, Jackie, about this, about who we might bring in to do this, because I think it is something I'd love to do with my team. Not only will that be helpful to my team, I also think it models these sorts of conversations and fostering that culture. But the ask I've got for you, actually, Hannah, I'd like you to help me, because I want to be the sort of manager where people would feel comfortable to have these conversations, to bring them forward. So I've got an ask of you, whether you can help me and I can share with you some of the challenges I've had in my career, and sometimes where I feel like maybe I've not created the culture I'd want to be able, for people to be able to feel comfortable to come forward. I want to do that well, and I think there's nothing like sort of hearing from somebody like yourself who's got some experience and some positive experiences. So that's my ask of you, if you like. That's the one thing I'm going to commit to doing, to follow up with you on that, if that's okay.
That's brilliant. That's great. That's almost flipped the script.
Really
and you did have a second specific ask, if that's okay, Julian, to ask Hannah.
Yeah. So Hannah, I was interested to ask you really, what one thing would make a difference to your lived experience working in your PS role at the University of Manchester?
Yeah. So first of all, I'd like to say, of course, I would be more than happy to work with you and help you on that. You know where I am, and I'm glad we've had this conversation and made that connection and that network together, because hopefully we can take this forward and do some good work together. So one thing that would make a difference to my lived experience in the PS role at the University of Manchester is we've spoken about intersectionality, and we've touched on it towards the end of this conversation, but one thing I think that would be really transformative is that if it was intersectional approaches were embedded and integrated into our new 2035 strategy. I actually put it on my sharing ideas on the website today. And I think if the university wants to get to a place where it is combating inequality and it is being socially responsible and it is accelerating its research impact on all the 5 themes that we're focusing on, I think it would be such a shame if intersectionality wasn't at the core of how driving our people to do the best that they can, and using the research, that maybe some of the academics have done on intersectionality in maybe Manchester or in the global context, using the kind of lessons learned from that and helping that inform our strategy and how we can use understanding intersectionality to really help marginalised people in the workplace to perform to the best that they can, and to bring their unique perspectives, challenge the system and really drive us to be a much more inclusive institution. It would be my dream PS.
Oh, Hannah, that was just so moving, right? But Julian and I, you can't see us because obviously it's audio recording, but Julian and I were just nodding our heads vigorously when we were listening to it, and absolutely transfixed by what you were saying, weren't we? And one of the things, I've got a final point that I don't normally make on these conversations, but I wanted to say, as a future leader, we need to hear your voice, okay? We need to hear our voices, obviously, because we're in positions to be able to influence, but we also need to capture more voices of people like you, Hannah, who are, the future, who are standing on platforms now where you'll grow into roles that will be really able to change. So actually, it's a perfect opportunity to start having that conversation that you've just so eloquently described about, let's not keep thinking about looking down single lenses through protected characteristics. Conditions or phases, but have to think about everything joined up, because we're all the sum of our parts, and those parts are multiple identities. So, we've touched on some of them today. There are others that we haven't touched on. Every person listening to this will have their own multiple identity. And you're so right. And I could not agree with you more that the more we section off things to look down a particular framework that's looking at a particular characteristic, the less we're looking at the big picture, which is what you've both spoken so beautifully about today. So Hannah, thank you so much for being my guest. Julian, of course, obviously, for you. Have you any final comments you just want to leave? I mean, we've finished officially sort of recording into the conversation now. Is there any final comments you just want to finish with?
I think I feel really privileged to have had this conversation, and I think the university is in really safe hands with people of your generation, with your experience and courage, to be able to advocate for the type of future that you want in the workplace, in the university, for yourself, of course, but also for the organisation so that you're going to work for in the future. And I think they'll be privileged to have somebody like you in them wherever you work. I hope you do create a long career at this university and you remain a colleague of mine in that. So just to say that it's been a really, really interesting conversation for Jackie and myself today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Julian. Hannah, any parting words?
So I was actually quite nervous to do this today and come on and be quite open about my lived experiences, but I'm so happy that I've done it, and I hope that it does resonate with the audience. And I do hope if anyone who is suffering with chronic illnesses or chronic pain, I hope that you know that you're not alone. And if you do need someone to speak to, my name's Hannah Murphy, please reach out to me. And I just wanted to end with saying thank you for Jackie for hosting me today. Thank you to Owen Mills for referring me to come and speak on the podcast, and thank you to Julian for taking your time to have this amazing conversation. So
that's
thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you both very much indeed. Thank you.